All right. Whoa, that's loud. Hi, guys. I'm Trent. So let's all just be a little bit quieter, please. I'll use the white noise trick. Thank you. You've eaten, your stomachs are calm. Let's learn a little bit about AI and blockchains. Let's get started. So today I will talk about blockchains for artificial intelligence. It's pretty fun, and it's actually not just buzzwords, as you will see. So a lot of you might have played Where's Waldo when you were children, or maybe still now, just like the coloring books. This here, what you see, is sort of like Where's Waldo, but for airplanes. Try to find the airplane in the noise. It's actually pretty easy, even for an AI, to find this airplane. But this AI actually not only found the airplane, it found the orientation. Pretty cool, right? Well, it's actually within a much broader scene. It wasn't doing just airplane finding. It was identifying all the different objects, from the airplane on the top left and its orientation, to the tree, and a bunch of humans below. Maybe one of those humans is named Waldo, who knows? Now, AI algorithms are also used to get even more general, for example, scene description. And if we look at this picture here, the AI thinks that it is a cat sitting on a toilet in a bathroom. No one ever claimed that AI algorithms are 100% accurate, so it's a funny-looking cat. But you know what? They've actually become good enough and accurate enough to use in a whole bunch of use cases. In fact, you might not realize, but AI algorithms have actually been in use for decades and decades, going back to the 60s and 70s and 80s in industrial use. In the field of CAD, for example, where I come from, for the designing of computer chips, they've been used since the 80s. This is actually where the field of simulated annealing came from. This iPhone here has about 15 chips inside it. Every single one of them was verified with an AI algorithm. And not just any AI algorithm, it was actually running on thousands of distributed machines for hours at a time to verify whether or not this chip, on each chip, was a 1 in a billion chance of failure or 1.1 in a billion. How do I know this? This is actually software that I helped create in my previous career. So I kind of crossed from the side of AI to the dark side of blockchain. So basically, there's real-world applications that have been out there for a long time in the world of AI. But of course, what's happened actually, in the last 5 years especially, it's taken off. And there's a reason for this. It started happening in the early 2000s. Researchers started to notice. A funny thing, what you see in this plot here is, on the x-axis, the number of data points, and the y-axis, the accuracy. And if you're an AI researcher, you know, when I was doing AI research in the 90s, I would get a data set. I would get maybe 1,000 or 10,000 samples, and I would spend all my time playing with that data just to try to make things a little bit more accurate, inventing new algorithms. But what researchers discovered as early as 2001 was, don't worry about the algorithm, worry about the data. And as you add more data, your accuracy goes way up. Here, for example, they had 10,000x more data with the same algorithms, and it reduced the error from 25% down to 3%. So all of this fun of playing with algorithms kind of went away, and it was really much more actually about the data. Data was unreasonably effective. In fact, fast forward 10 years from this initial realization from Google and Microsoft and others, and data has been called the world's most valuable resource. And with reason, these companies below that have data at their very heart and soul, Google, Amazon, and so on, have become the most valuable companies on the planet. And it's really a very simple formula. More data and compute power leads to more accurate models, which leads to more money, right? For selling ads and so on, right? Some of the brightest minds selling ads, but guess what? There's dollars there. So let's ask, what do the AI algorithms look like in the context of sort of the broader compute stack? And for first principles, let's look at the three elements of computing: storage, processing, and communications. Within each, these actually have subcomponents. With storage, we've got file systems, things like HDFS, Hadoop, S3 with Amazon. And then for databases, these are the big data databases that are powering things in AI, MongoDB, Cassandra, and more. With processing, business logic like CPUs and Amazon EC2 don't play as much of a role. What's really playing a role for the world of AI is things like NVIDIA GPUs, which have massive, massive thousands of processors running in parallel. The Google Tensor Processing Unit, which they just opened up to the cloud last week. MapReduce and Spark, which are ways to have massive batches of compute. So these are the things that are driving AI on storage for the data and processing for the compute. So you might think, well, isn't this cool? You know, AI is transforming things, all of this. But the fact of the matter is, all is not well in the world of AI. There is massive data hoarding happening. Big guys have all the data, right? This is their moat. there's weak data history. It's the classic problem of garbage in, garbage out for AI algorithms. Where did your data come from? Is your model actually accurate if the the training data is accurate? And if you want to buy the data, it's super expensive. So this is just a few problems. There are many more. We've been asking, can decentralization help? And another way of asking is, can you use blockchain technology somehow to help unlock AI, to solve some of the problems with artificial intelligence? And we've been coming to realize that one of the pieces is perhaps a shared database with planetary reach. And sort of as a quick review, memory lane of databases, if you go back to the early 80s, that was the house that Larry Ellison built with Oracle. And what that was basically you could actually query large mountains of data with a very structured query language, SQL itself, right? And that became one of the most valuable companies on the planet. Following that, there was other blue ocean databases that emerged. MySQL, which basically made it easy to build websites with databases. Big data databases like Mongo actually allowed these websites to scale in the early 2000s. And more recently, we see that blockchain databases are in this long line of blue ocean databases, bringing in the decentralization. So not just distributed databases, which distribute the compute loads and storage, but decentralized, spreading the control. And that can have major ramifications, as we'll show. So with this, there's actually been an emerging compute stack that's decentralized. And these elements within this are storage, processing, communication once again. And within that, we've got file systems, database, and eGold or eCash for storing tokens of value. And there's some emergent players here, right? For file systems, a key one is IPFS and Filecoin. Juan will be following me giving his talk. Swarm, and there's others. In the world of database, decentralized databases, this is what I spend my time on with BigchainDB, and it's PublicNet, IPDB. And with eGold and eCash, there's Bitcoin. It's really about this store of value, or Zcash, and basically every other blockchain out there that has its own tokens. In business logic, for the processing side, decentralized business logic, this really is smart contracts. It's a better label, decentralized business logic. So be it. And something that's emerging, actually, is high-performance compute, right? How do you have large-scale computation happening in the world of AI? And we've had things like TrueBit, Golem, and iExec emerging. These aren't quite mature yet, though, so we've also seen that people are running virtual machines, using VMs as assets, this sort of thing, and simply client-side compute on their mobile phones, inside the browser, et cetera. And in communications, too, there's things happening. So within the world of AI, there's a few things here that are the most important, the building blocks that matter the most. First of all, file system, where IPFS is probably the most mature. Database, BigchainDB, IPDB. And in high-performance compute, the VMs and the client-side compute is the most mature. So this is really the tools, if you want to do AI applications related to blockchain, these are the ones you're probably going to be working with. Let's talk about some of these applications. There's some really cool things emerging. So on the problem of data hoarding, there's a problem where if I'm a designer of 3D parts and I go to manufacture it, I send it off to the factory in China or something. If that design gets stolen, someone else can manufacture it, and so on. And the problem is, if I'm a manufacturer, I have to talk to every single design company and know what's going on. We have these data silos. But imagine if there was a pool of all of this data together that all of the different designers and manufacturers work together on. And that way, with that, you could actually identify fraudulent copies, et cetera. So this is actually what we're working on with Cognizant Energy, 3D Maker Zone, Intel. And it's basically leading to more accurate models for fraud prevention in supply chain. Another example for fraud prevention in supply chain is with diamonds. So in this case, we worked on a project where we had pooled data from multiple certification houses. And we realized that there's very many factors to identify whether a diamond was fraudulent or not. But a key one was the idea of price prediction. So when a diamond shows up on eBay, how do you know whether or not it's fraudulent or not? Especially given that overall, there's a 40% fraud rate in diamonds. And what we did was we built models that actually predicted the price as a function of the 4 Cs, the carats, the color, and more. And with that, we could actually predict the price within 1% accuracy. So if the price actually had variation beyond that, we would know very quickly. There's a lot of other problems, too, that actually the AI combined with blockchain can help. So here's one example. In this case, I have a design. In this case, it's a cart tree, a decision tree that I did during my PhD 10 years ago. And if I want to sell this thing, it's going to be a big pain in the butt, right? So what I can do now, though, is I can just go and timestamp this, claim copyright, timestamp it onto the blockchain, and then simply license it. And this is actually where we started 4 years ago when we were working on Ascribe. We actually ran into issues of scale, and that's actually what led us to BigChainDB. But here, I've got a decision tree that is ascribed. If one of you wants to buy it, an edition from me, just come to me afterwards, and I'm happy to sell it to you. So $5, or 10 if you want, edition number 3. So that's an example. Another one, which we're not working on, but I think it's super cool, is Numeraire. And they are basically also addressing this problem of how do you monetize algorithms easily. They're essentially a hedge fund in a box. So they're a hedge fund, but rather than 5 geniuses in a corner dreaming up new algorithms, they actually are using a community of 12,000 data scientists who are submitting algorithms to predict the stock market and trade. From that, each scientist was actually getting winnings proportional to the, how well his algorithm did. Now, this had a problem, and the problem was the more that one person's algorithm did, the less winnings others would get. It was a zero-sum game. So what these guys did was they tokenized it. And by doing the tokenized, it made it from a zero-sum game to a positive-sum game. And that allowed this rising tide lifts all boat phenomenon to occur. So it's a very cool, clean example of the value of tokenization. Keeping going, also when we were working in the Ascribe days, we had a problem. People didn't want to put their art and other images onto any blockchain system or anything online at all because they were worried if it showed up at all, then maybe it's gone for good. It's spread for good, they lose control. So we said, what if we could give you visibility into where this stuff is spreading? So we crawled the web. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of compute power crawling the web with Amazon. So AWS loved us, actually. And we had 15 billion images. And from that, we had AI technology to basically do the equivalent of Google reverse image search, but with provenance of copy. So what you see here, I did a search for Doge. And you can see, actually, right in early 2014 was when it started taking off with Dogecoin. And since then, there are now more than 2,600 copies spread across a whole variety of different websites. Each website is a different color here. So you can use this today if you want. Just go to Where on the Net, and you can actually search for the spread of anything, your company's logo, for example. So keeping going forward, if I'm building a data model, and if I'm building an AI model, what about the data itself? What if I don't know where it comes from? What if someone gives me garbage data? Then I'm going to actually have a garbage model. What if instead that every time I ingest data, that data is signed? I know the full provenance of the training data. And then when I train the model, also, the process from that training is signed. Every single step along the way of model building and model simulation is signed. This is actually possible now. What you do is you simply timestamp the data to something like a public database, like IPDB, and store the data itself, the model itself, into something like IPFS. And then you have basically these immutable audit trails of AI, data, and models. This is incredibly powerful, especially when you have things coming along through the European Union and so on, where you actually have to explain what your algorithm did, otherwise the regulators come after you. So on this, here's a very specific example. We're working with Innogy, Riddle Encode, and others on something called CarPass. And CarPass solves the issue of when you go into a used car lot, how do you know what you're buying isn't a lemon? How do you know you're not getting ripped off? Imagine if you saw the whole history of that car, right? From the day that it was purchased, even the days that it was manufactured and so on, every repair, every oil change, and so on. And with that, and everywhere it drove, et cetera. So, and with that, then you could even data mine it. And that's actually what's happening here. So we actually have, this is an app that's running. You can come to our booth and see it even. And basically, it is data mining what's going on with the car data. And you see some of the plots and data mining below. Interestingly, also, it points to a very simple architecture for blockchain deployment, if you like. You can actually build a simple web page app, a single-page web app, and below that, have a database, IPDB. That's it. You don't need anything else. So this is one of the alternative architectures you can have to quickly roll out blockchain systems. Keeping going, on this problem of compute and storage being expensive, we're seeing this emergence now of tokenizing file systems for massive data storage, as well as high-performance compute, right? And there's quite a few in each. And I apologize if I missed some, but these are some in the world of file systems. We've got storage with a J, Filecoin, Swarm, Sia. On high-performance compute, we've got TrueBit, Golem, iExec, and more. So this is really very exciting, and it really promises to pull down the cost of storage and compute more. Keeping going, though, one of the higher-level problems that's remaining is data is expensive, right? This goes back to Google using data as a moat. It's not algorithms. It's giving away the algorithms. But it likes data so much, it loves data so much that it even buys satellite companies for imaging. So, and they're going to charge you tons of money or not even give that to you. So what is the ultimate way to unlock data? We believe that it is data exchanges. And with that, we are actually spending significant effort working towards making data exchanges to power AI algorithms. An example that we actually just announced today, are announcing here even, is a decentralized data exchange for self-driving cars. We're doing this with Toyota and many others. And basically what this is it turns out I can build an algorithm that is 99% accurate for self-driving cars. But what that means is 1% of the time it's going to crash. It's maybe even going to kill someone. So you can't be just 1% error. You can't be 1 in 1,000. You can't be 1 in a million. You really need to be 1 in a billion or 1 in 10 billion chance of error. But to get there, you need a lot of data, more data than any single car manufacturer can make. So what Toyota and the others are doing is pooling their data. And not just pooling it and sharing it, but actually selling it to each other. How are they determining the prices? As an exchange, automatic determinant, the list of bids, the list of asks, and so on. So what you see here actually is an app. We call it AVDEX, Autonomous Vehicles Data Exchange. It's, once again, a single-page web app running in the browser. You log in. You actually choose your username, password, all this, with a Brain wallet. And you can see here that we actually have the data that is ascribed to the blockchain. And in this case, it is IPDB. Another angle from the AI perspective is self-driving cars are the killer app for AI. And that's actually very true, especially in the next 5 years. It's going to have massive ramifications in society. And we're very excited because we see that this will help to unlock safe self-driving cars. I have one final example for you people, and it's probably the craziest, but also the most fun. It's really a symbiosis with AI and blockchain. I call them AI DAOs, Artificial Intelligent Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, AI DAOs. For some background, so there's a whole subfield out there of AI research on machine creativity. One example, my friend Greg here, while he was a scientist at NASA, he had a side project where he was automatically designing jewelry. So every single one of these pieces of jewelry you see here, pendants for necklaces, are actually automatically designed. And he actually set up a startup that he called Orbimi that was actually automatically designing these on the fly. Just like Amazon was the Earth's largest bookstore, Orbimi is actually Earth's largest jewelry store. There are billions and billions and billions of designs in there. And you click, and you click, and you click until you get the one you like. And then it automatically 3D manufactures it. You buy your jewelry. So machine creativity is here, folks. I actually did my PhD in this back about 10 years ago as well. So I was actually automatically designing wholly new analog circuits. Here's some examples here. So take that. Let's also take the idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI. So this is the idea, rather than just solving narrow AI apps, instead you have agents that sense, model, and act. For example, they can run around in Minecraft in a simulated environment. And in fact, you can frame them as control systems. A control system, a feedback control system, has a model of the world, and then it actuates against that world, senses what's going on, and tries to update that model of the world and itself. So it's actually a well-studied thing because this theory goes back to Wiener in the 50s and ever since with all the control systems theory. By the way, this framing of AGI is actually what drove AlphaGo in the recent successes with solving Go a couple years ago. So let's come to this example as a really nice way to think about AI DAOs. I call it the art DAO. Here's how it works. Step one, you have an AI art engine to generate a new image, right? Off-the-shelf software, 50 lines of code, 100. Then you claim attribution in the blockchain, just like I showed you before with Ascribe or with my carts. And then you post them for sale onto a marketplace. And of course, you'd use a decentralized marketplace like OpenBazaar, right? And then you sell them. And by the way, when I say you, I don't mean you. I mean the agent that is running on decentralized processing substrate, right? And by the way, it has its own wallet, of course, right? Think of it like a computer virus with a Bitcoin wallet, right? But it's running out there. It's creating these things that have value, and it's selling them. People are buying them. So what happens is, let's say it spends $1 of compute power to create this art. It sells 10 editions for $1 each, makes $10. Then it turns that around, spends $10 to create 100 new editions, sells those. Keeps going, 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 goes from $100 to $1,000 to $1 million and beyond. We will have the world's first AI millionaires with technology of today. Maybe even the world's first AI billionaires, right? So to me, that is super exciting. I should mention that it's also, there are benefits. It's not just an art experiment. For example, if you are Uber and you want to do self-driving cars, do you actually want to buy all of those self-driving cars? That's a lot of capital. Why not let them be self-owning self-driving cars, right? Let them buy themselves from Uber, right? Self-owning forests with TerraZero, there's other things too. So these AI DAOs actually have a real reason, and that is for capital efficiency, right? It's a double-edged sword too, quite dangerous, and we can go on and on. But I will summarize now because I think they're cool. We could go on and on. Come talk to me afterwards. So I'm going to summarize saying AI has helped drive Moore's Law. Moore's Law has helped drive AI, especially the data and the compute. But here's the cool thing. Blockchains are going to make a big difference to the world of AI for everything from data sharing, for better models, as opposed to the data hoarding, provenance on AI models, exchanges for AI and models, and I really see that this will become fundamental internet infrastructure, just like the emerging file systems are becoming fundamental internet infrastructure, emerging databases and so on. It will also be the same for data exchanges. And finally, AI DAOs, the world's first AI millionaires. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you. Sorry, you had to hear that. That was an awesome talk. I don't know if I'm going to be able to follow that up with something as exciting as AI and blockchain. I recommend you follow Trent. His blog post is full of awesome ideas around this, so definitely check it out. So what I'm going to talk about is a new way of doing token fundraising. Let's see, I'm trying to go next. I don't know if it's switching slides for you. Tech AV. I will hold. I will buy some time. Who's having fun in the conference right now? Seems like half the people in the front. What about the people in the back? Are you having fun over there? Yeah, kind of lukewarm. Maybe you can't see. Yeah, take it out. One more. Maybe I just am totally incompetent and I can't click a button. Oh, it's not me. I'll just start thinking through describing what led up to this. My name is Juan. I'm the founder of a company called Protocol Labs. We make a lot of tech for the internet. We make low-level internet protocols. And you'll see the stack. You probably know me from IPFS, or you know Protocol Labs from IPFS. We make the interplanetary file system. It's used in a whole bunch of projects by a whole bunch of applications and so on. And we also make a thing called Filecoin, has been on wanting to launch for a while, and it's been delayed for a number of things, a number of reasons, including what I'm going to talk about today. And so let's see. Let's test this again. Nope. No dice. So you probably have seen the ICOs going on right now, right? Like, who has seen the ICO list today? Like, who is aware of the number of ICOs happening like right now, right this second? Who remembers the Ethereum first sale, like the pre-sale? Well, a lot of people were actually. That's great. I expected like even less. I expected the group to have grown. What about? Do you think this is gonna? How many people here can think this trend is going to continue and it's going to like grow and be intense? All right. How many people think this is like totally overvalued and this tech is like not a? Wow, a few. How many people think the projects being built now are going to be very important fundamental pieces of infrastructure for the world? A ton. Would you say that's the case about all of them? Careful. So I'm going to ask if is this going to work at all? I think they're still scrambling back there. Hopefully they give me time so I can get to show you the stuff. So it's a very interesting time, right? I think a lot of the people that I know, that I talked to, that were around in the 90s, see this as like 94, 95 of the era of the web. And so they're seeing like this blossoming of a whole bunch of tech and a whole bunch of ideas that make a lot of sense, some of which might be ahead of its time, some of which might be right in the nick of time. And so you will probably see the creation of networks that are going to command massive amounts of value, that are potentially going to create trillions of dollars in value in the long term. But being able to, OK, I think it works. Great. Thank you. Thanks, guys. By the way, I've run AV for a conference before, and it is super stressful when something like this happens. So thank you guys. You guys are awesome for pulling it through. Yeah, huge round of applause for the AV team. All right, so CoinList, a token fundraising platform. Quick disclaimers. I am not a lawyer. None of this is legal advice. I am not a financial advisor. None of this is financial advice. All plans expressed here are subject to change. This may contain forward-looking statements subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ greatly. So don't make any decisions based on what you find here. This is merely informative, speculative, thoughtful. All right. Past that. All right, so Protocol Labs. We make internet infrastructure protocols. We have a number of projects. We have IPFS, Filecoin. We have some underlying infrastructure tech like libp2p, IPLD, and so on. And now we made something very different to all of that. And that's a platform called CoinList. It is a fundraising platform for token networks. And so in our stack, when you think through the set of things that we're building, the majority of the protocols we make day to day have no monetization whatsoever in them. They're just open source, traditional protocols, and that's what they should be. Some protocols that we make are what we like to call market protocols. Protocols that create some sort of market and have some sort of economic actors exchanging value. And those protocols are the ones that have some token associated with them. And so the business model of Protocol Labs is to create some set of these market protocols and create a business around that, around the assets being created. And we find that that's an amazingly good alignment of incentives because it makes sure that everyone creating the protocol is aligned with just creating the protocol, as opposed to today, when the majority of people creating protocols are actually financially incented at layers above, like with services and apps and so on. So many times there's this huge pressure to kind of co-opt the protocol itself and to promote the service or app instead of the protocol. So we think that the protocols like Filecoin and so on, and Ethereum and Bitcoin and so on, have this tremendously good alignment of incentives with the people developing them. We'll see how this plays out. We'll probably find out in 5, 10 years that they also have warped incentives as well, and then we'll have to figure out what to do next. IPFS addresses a whole bunch of problems. I'm not going to go into them here. You can find out all about IPFS on the internet. And Filecoin, I'll mention it a little bit because it's important that you understand the context. Filecoin is a decentralized storage network. You can think of it like Bitcoin meets Amazon S3. It's on top of IPFS, and the goal is to use massive amounts of latent storage out there in the world. I want you to think through how much unused storage do you think there is right now on the planet? Right? Like, how many people think it's like, 10% of the used storage? 20%? 50%? How many people think it's like twice as much? A lot of people, more than that, less than that? I don't know. People. I encourage you to think about it. It's a very interesting mental exercise to think about the utilization of your computer or a data center if you have visibility into something like that, and then just extrapolate and think through how much data out there, how many disks sit with those bits not flipped, and imagine being able to put all of those to good use. So the goal of Filecoin is to create an incentive structure similar to Bitcoin that causes miners to come together and put all of that massive amount of hardware to good use. You can think of it like a decentralized market for storage. You can think of miners coming in and either side of some market where people place bids and asks, and you clear them, and so on. It uses a blockchain. You can go and find out more about all this in the web. But the simplest way to think about it is that you can either earn Filecoin for storing files. Your disk starts popping out Filecoins. You can then exchange those for Bitcoin, Ether, dollars, whatever. Or you can spend Filecoin to hire the network to store your stuff. Earn, exchange, or spend. It's a very simple idea, but the goal here is to think about modeling the behavior of the market protocol and weaving a token through it. And so these tokens are called protocol tokens or app coins. These are names for the same kind of idea. And the critical thing to note, though, is that the token itself has a useful value. The token itself is going to be spent in the hiring of the network to store data. Similar to how Ethereum, the Ether, you spend Ether to hire the Ether network to run your computation. So now that's kind of like little bit of a short primer on what Filecoin is and why we needed to have a token sale. So let's just think of the days of yore when all of this was starting and Ethereum did its sale, and everyone was like, "Whoa, this is incredible! This is a new way of funding." And then there's been a number of sales, and I just picked some. These are not necessarily the biggest, and so on. I think the DAO was probably the biggest. And so at sale, like the value calculated at sale was around this much. This is not exact, but it's just summarizing the result. Ethereum right after Bitcoin crashed, so they lost a lot of value. The DAO, well, that happened. But what about the other ones? Golem, Cosmos, Gnosis, and Aragon. Well, Ethereum went up a lot, and Bitcoin went up a lot. And so when you calculate the equivalent value of those tokens now, you get something like this, which is ridiculous. Think about the DAO, $2 billion. That's a lot of money. The thought, though, is close to 500 million at time of sale have been raised with this. And to put that in perspective, I think in 2015, YC put out a stats about all its startups. And they'd raised, I think, a combined total of 7 billion through 10 years. So 10 years of YC, 7 billion total. So these sales have raised a 14th of that in, I think, 2 years, maybe two, 3 years. And this is growing dramatically. So maybe in this year alone, we'll hit 1 billion. Maybe we'll hit more of raised at that time. So this has become a new way of fundraising. This is not something new. This is not something that's coming and so on. This is already here. Major infrastructure projects are being built this way. And there's a lot of returns to be had, which means that a lot of investors are like, whoa, the VC investing game has shifted and has changed to go, we now have to go and think about investing in these kinds of assets. And the assets are very different. So they're much more liquid. The hold times are not as long. They have all sorts of different characteristics. So it's a good deal to investors in a whole bunch of ways. It's also a really good deal for teams. Sometimes you don't need to create a company. Sometimes you don't need to have alignment for 10 years. There's a whole bunch of utility that comes by modeling the asset that you fundraise the project with be these tokens. But there's a problem here, and there's kind of like the big elephant in the room that everyone kind of like doesn't want to acknowledge is there's questions as to like the legality of some of these sales. And so for safety, a lot of them have decided to it's very complex to navigate the US legal system around this, and in many cases have gone off to Switzerland or Gibraltar or the British Virgin Islands and so on. And the organizations are actually sometimes for-profit, sometimes they're non-profit, sometimes there's combinations where there's a development company associated with a non-profit. And so there's a whole bunch of organizational creativity and optimization here. And the issue is like, why is this not so doable in the US now? Like what are the core issues? And so it turns out that there's many regulations you would have to comply with. You have to understand deeply how security laws work, how commodities work, how FinCEN and KYC AML work, what the tax treatment is. So some example questions that you would have to suddenly ask yourselves are token pre-sales selling securities? If you sell the token ahead of time before the network is out, is that a security? That's one of the most asked about questions. Are these investments or purchases? Are people buying these tokens to invest in them? What is the distribution there? Are most people buying it to use it? Are most people buying it to invest it? Most token sales do token sales have to do KYC or an AML? Or is it OK for them not to? Are the funds raised taxable as income? So that's not fundraising, right? So if you go and incorporate a company today and you go and you pitch a lot of VCs and you raise funding, and you manage to convince them to give you X million dollars, you now are going to go and pay salaries, and then suddenly the government shows up and says like, no, hold on, you just raised some money. Let me take a huge chunk of that. And of course that didn't make sense, and so there was an exemption put into law around stock and saying, look, if you raised funding, you haven't really created any value yet. You raised funding, and so there's an exemption around stock, and like that's not taxable. But tokens are not stock. So presumably you just sold something. And so there's a whole bunch of questions to figure out. And the reality, when you zoom out, a lot of this is going to cost probably new regulation to come into play in the future, right? So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people will have a much better handle as to how these tokens work, and we'll probably have new regulation that will create good boxes for them. But between now and then, we have to have good structures that work with the current regulatory schemes, and to make sure that all of the activity here is compliant. And so the thing that bothered me about all of this is like, look, the United States is this amazing country where there's massive amounts of innovation, right? Like we developed computers, so maybe Turing came up with them and he was British, but we developed them and we have them at massive scale. And there's we built the ARPANET, we built public key cryptography, we built a lot. The web was also invented in Europe, but we took that and we ran with it and we developed a lot more. And there's Google and of course SpaceX and Tesla, two of my favorite companies on the planet. There's an enormous amount of innovation here in technology. And what I see lagging is that the best teams in tech, in blockchain tech, are moving overseas. They're leaving the US. And that's not good. And so I think that we need to solve this once and for all for the entire ecosystem and have a good way of getting the project started here. And it may not fit everything. It may not satisfy every single desire that people have. But at least it'll be a way for projects that are starting here to be built here and so on. And it may turn out that this structure is actually really good for other countries too. So we've done most of the perspective and thought around the US, but this might actually fit a whole bunch of other regulatory places as well. You didn't see Germany in those lists. You didn't see the UK, and so on. So can we do better? Can we do token fundraising in a compliant way? Can we make something that non-crypto startups would use? So here's an interesting thought. There's a lot of network economies built, things like Airbnb and Uber and so on. And you can think of, that's a market protocol, right? Like you can think of weaving an asset through it. What will be the first company that has nothing to do with cryptocurrency, nothing to do with crypto assets, nothing to do with computation, that has something to do with the real world of atoms, and actually issues a token, or actually fundraises in this way? That's when you will see like this dramatic tipping point and shift where suddenly a ton more startups will start fundraising this way. And so it's when we approach this, it's really important to distinguish between two events, or two times, before launch and after launch. And so the term ICO that a lot of people use is ambiguous in this case, because a lot of people use it both for the what we term as pre-sale, and sometimes they use it as a sale. And so when you think about startups, not about cryptocurrency investments and not about cryptocurrency fundraising, there is VC and angels invest in something risky. And then that goes and does a launch and so on. And at some point, maybe it IPOs. And then at some point, other people can buy it. And there's a reason for that. The regulations are there in place for a reason. And I'll show you why in a moment. For an in-depth treatment into this, and at least the securities question, definitely read the Coin Center report. Is some of the best work in this, like super helpful in a ton of ways. They go through in detail and in depth into all of the different pieces, and so on. But I think one of the key things here is that fundraising with the token might be fine if you do it after the network has launched. But many of these networks need intensive investment at the beginning before you actually launch. And so the framework that we're discussing is mostly for that pre-launch environment, right? So this is like the red part here, like the riskier part. And so in this case, this is where like it's much more likely to be an investment than just for use. So regulations have good reasons, right? So if you think that accredited investors and so on, or like forcing accreditation and so on is a terrible thing, and I agree that the regulations may not be the best at selecting sophistication, right? Like you might know how to evaluate this much better than somebody that has a lot of money, and you might be from that perspective a much more sophisticated investor in this area. But it's very difficult for regulators to like try and test you. And so a very long time ago, they declared this, in the original act, they declared this amount of money classification. And who knows, maybe that'll change. Maybe you can talk to your government and have that changed. But the regulation is in place for a really good reason. And if you don't think so, watch Wolf of Wall Street, watch Boiler Room, and after that, think about that again. And if it still doesn't sink in, like watch them again, right? Like the crazy thing is that whenever there's an economic boom, it is going to attract a lot of unscrupulous people that are going to take advantage of people that don't know much. This has already happened in the crypto space. There's been a bunch of different scams, some of them quite big, and I think is going to get much worse unless we clean up part of the space. It's just entirely way too easy right now for a group to completely pretend to be legitimate to many investors that cannot tell the difference between a legitimate project that has really hard tech and good infrastructure and a project that does not. And that's an issue. So there's going to be a ton of noise, and finding signal is going to be very difficult. So whatever we can do in the space to improve that, I think is important. So one possible solution, right, and so I'll describe like possible solutions here, is to think through, take that pre-launch sale, like the riskiest part, and do that with accredited investors only. And that fits into the regulatory framework of the US. And so you can think about creating an instrument that converts or is traded for or yields tokens at some point in time in the future. And so at the very beginning, you would raise investment in a kind of slightly more traditional way, have this instrument that would then be traded for tokens later. And so there's actually regulation that helps here, where we can create something very, very close to what people are doing with the sales. And a credit goes to also, I think, Blockchain Capital that did this already, where they did a Reg D 506C offering. But the important thing here is that people need to then make sure to accredit investors and so on to make sure that it's compliant. So we're taking a step back. YC did a whole bunch of interesting legal innovation when they created the simple agreement for future equity, the SAFE. They encountered a landscape that was kind of turbulent. There were all these convertible notes and a whole bunch of complexity and so on, and they tried to simplify it with a standard. And that helped a ton of companies. The SAFE has been used by tens of thousands of organizations. So can we do something similar? So the idea is, can we create something like a simple agreement for future token where we create a project to simplify and standardize the token fundraising arena. We create a project that develops a compliant industry standard and continues to iterate till there's the perfect solution, right? It might take a long time to find the perfect thing, but we can already find like really good solutions now that can provide people guidelines of like pre-launch and post-launch fundraising schemes and so on, and have like some candidate instruments that people can use. And so we have a ton of work around that. We'll be publishing some of this work soon. We're working with the best and the brightest in the industry. And we want to work with more, actually. So if you're a lawyer in this space and you're deeply interested in stuff, come talk to us, because we want to have this be a very significant industry-wide thing, a really big tent that everyone can come together under, and kind of evolve the industry and help it mature. And this will be open source, and it can be improved, and anybody can use it for anything, and so on. Also, credit goes to Polychain and another group, I forget I think Colony, who also had the same idea of taking the SAFE and adapting it. So this was an idea that was in the room. I think Joel Monegro used to be from USB also. We talked about that a lot. So this is kind of like a call to join the SAF project if you care about this stuff. So at the very top is the people that are actually working on this. At the bottom are some of interested investors that have been thinking about this, and we are going to be working directly with them on the Filecoin sale. So they'll have a lot of thoughts to develop around this, and of course you can join it. So the last remaining 2 minutes, I'll show you CoinList, the platform that abstracts all of this complexity into something really simple. So think about Kickstarter or AngelList. Those two platforms helped navigate a massive sea of complexity around fundraising for projects. And so we solved our own problem here. We said, look, this is a mess. We got to fix it. And if we're going to fix it for ourselves, we might as well fix it for everyone. So we created this platform called CoinList. And we created this in partnership with AngelList. And so other projects will be able to list and fundraise through this platform in the future after the Filecoin sale goes through. And then you log in with an AngelList login. So if you're already an investor there or accredited, you're already good. If you're new to all this, you go through a pretty simple accreditation process, and then you can invest in these startups. Startup networks, right? So this is the site that you see right now. You can sign up for updates there at the bottom and so on. And when this Filecoin sale goes live, then you'll see a lot more to the site and how the platform actually works. And if you are running a project that you think might make sense for this, then come talk to us as well. So this is a new fundraising platform developed by Protocol Labs and AngelList. The Filecoin sale will be the first sale through it. It will use the SAFT, and it will abstract the complexity away. So it's very simple. And we think that pre-launch fundraising, before the network is live, where it's most risky in the US, probably very likely requires accreditation. So out of abundance of caution, we'll do that. And we encourage other projects to think through it as well and read the products of the SAFT project and read through the analysis there, so you can make your own decision. So again, we think that CoinList is going to be primarily for that time. It's likely that some offerings might make sense even later. This might create an interesting network around helping surface the value that projects have to offer and so on. So today in Kickstarter, you could go and run your own Kickstarter on your own site, but there's still value to using it. So we expect that some networks, even after launch, potentially might use it. But we aim it entirely around pre-launch projects. And so I think we'll succeed when the next Airbnb uses this kind of thing, not necessarily CoinList, but uses the SAFT or this kind of fundraising structure to finance their own company. When it's nothing related to crypto itself, but rather they're thinking about a market protocol and thinking about weaving a token, and then they realize that they could fundraise this way and they don't have to do the equity route. Because this is a much more democratic way to involve your entire user base, and a much more democratic way to involve all of the participants in the network to get a huge chunk of the value created by the network in the long term. Also, huge thanks to Ryan from Polychain. He wrote an awesome post about the future of all of this. Super thankful. Go read it. I have to run now, wrap it up. So next steps is stay tuned. Go check out the constructions when we put them out. Filecoin will be the first sale on CoinList. And also sign up for updates. Come talk to us, especially if you're a lawyer in the field and have opinions on all this stuff. We'd love to talk to you. We want to create a big open standard around this so that we can clean up the space and make it better. And as we move into this very huge hike in the valuations of all these projects, and we have many more and much more money raised, we can go into it with caution and carefulness and not accidentally get swindled by people that are out there to take your money. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.